A Navy SEAL who once survived the deadliest battlefields never imagined death would come for him this quietly, this cruelly. His breath faded as icy water dragged him under, the echo of an unexpected ambush still ringing in his skull. But what shook him more than the attack was the man behind it, a figure far more ruthless than anything he'd faced in war. Just as darkness closed in, a shadow burst through the river and pulled him to shore. What saved his life that night, he could never have believed. And that was only the beginning. This story will take you from one shock to the next. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe for more tales of loyalty, survival, and the miracles that shape our lives. The desert night lay cold and razor-thin, the kind that pressed into the bones and whispered of things better left unremembered. Owen Hale moved along the riverbank with the silent precision of a man who had spent half his life slipping through darkness. At 38, Owen carried the carved angles of someone shaped by conflict, a strong, square jaw brushed with a few days of stubble, deep-set gray eyes that looked as if sleep had forgotten them years ago, and a tall, weather-worn frame hardened by war and solitude. His short, dark hair, streaked prematurely with silver, caught the moonlight like threads of frost. The scars on his knuckles and the faint one beneath his left eye were remnants of Afghanistan, reminders of a mission that had gone wrong and a team that never made it home. That night, as the river stirred faint ripples under the moon, he felt something unsettling under the quiet. The Colorado River usually murmured with a steady rhythm, but tonight it sounded restless, as if it sensed something he didn't. Owen walked with a deliberate calm born from years of conditioning. Weight shifted evenly, eyes sweeping left to right, ears tuned even to the whisper of a twig. Since leaving SEAL Team operations, he had tried to find a life that made sense, a life where he could continue serving without drowning in memories. Border patrol along the isolated sectors of Arizona had felt like the closest thing to purpose. Here, the silence was not judgmental. Here, loneliness didn't sting. It simply existed. As he moved deeper along the sandy edge of the river, he noticed the first anomaly. An old burlap bag snagged on a mesquite root, torn open to reveal bricks wrapped in black plastic. His breath tightened. Smugglers, and recently. Kneeling, he inspected the sand. 2 sets of footprints, still sharp, pressed down by boots not yet softened by time. He reached forward, brushing the edge of one print, feeling the cold granules. Someone had passed through less than an hour ago. A prickle of instinct crawled across the back of his neck. Owen stood up slowly, every muscle shifting into silent alert. He loosened his shoulders, preparing for movement, and tilted his head to listen. Nothing. Only the drip of water from the exposed roots and the distant hum of wind scraping across stone. Yet his pulse began to thrum faster, the same deep thud he'd felt moments before an ambush overseas. It was the old rhythm, warning him, urging him. But tonight, unlike Afghanistan, he was alone. He took a cautious step toward the nearby brush, leaning down to check a broken branch. The branch still held warmth from a recent hand. Then a faint click, soft, deliberate, reached his ears. Too close. Far too close. Owen pivoted, but the move came a fraction too late. A figure burst from the darkness with violent force. Before he could fully raise his arm, something hard, metal, likely the butt of a rifle, slammed into the side of his skull. White exploded, behind his eyes. His breath shot out in a ragged gasp as he staggered backward, boots slipping on loose sand. His vision split into shards as he saw the attacker briefly. A broad-shouldered man in dark clothing, face half hidden by a scarf, eyes cold with intent. Not the nervous eyes of a rookie smuggler. These were trained, steady, meant for killing. Owen tried to brace himself, but his knees buckled. The world around him twisted, the river groaning somewhere far away. He felt the cold grit of sand beneath his fingers as he fell, his hand instinctively reaching for the knife strapped to his belt. But his body no longer listened. His attacker loomed above him for a second, just long enough for Owen to catch a glimpse of a faint tattoo winding up the man's wrist, a snarling wolf's head. Owen tried to memorize it, though his mind was slipping. Another blow landed against his temple. Harder, final. His ears rang with a violent hum. The moon fractured into 3 wavering halos. The last thing he heard was the river, its waves slapping the shore like distant applause. Then he felt himself pulled downward, swallowed by the same darkness that once took his team, and this time he had no one at his back. The cold river swallowed all sense of time as Owen Hale clawed his way back toward consciousness. His eyelids felt cemented shut, and when he finally pried them open, the world above him swayed like a bruised sky caught in slow motion. His body was twisted unnaturally. His wrists were bound so tightly behind his back that the rope dug into his skin like burning wire. A filthy wad of cloth had been shoved into his mouth, tasting of rust and soil. The first thing he realized was that he couldn't feel solid ground beneath him. Beneath his spine, the surface dipped and groaned, a wooden raft, pieced together from old planks swollen by water. The second thing he realized was the cold. The river's icy breath licked at his skin, numbing him, settling into the bones like a reminder that death had a patient hand and plenty of time. When he tried to move, pain roared across the side of his skull where the blow had landed. The memory of the attacker's wolf tattoo flickered in his mind, a sharp detail in an otherwise fogged landscape. He forced his eyes to adjust. The river carried him steadily downstream, sluggish but relentless, its current pushing the raft away from the faint outline of the shoreline. Clouds drifted overhead, their gray bellies brushing the jagged silhouettes of distant cliffs. On the right bank, 2 men watched him float away as though discarding a broken tool. The first was a wiry man with narrow shoulders and sunken cheeks, his skin darkened by years of harsh exposure. His thin black hair clung to his scalp in clumps, and his sharp eyes held a strange mixture of boredom and cruelty. This was Hector Ruiz, a minor smuggler known for doing whatever job paid, even those that ended with corpses. Hector was the kind of man shaped not by tragedy but by apathy. He simply didn't care whether people lived or died. Beside him stood a second man, broader and heavier, with thick arms covered in faded prison tattoos. His name was Mateo Boar Salinas, a man with a heavy brow ridge, a square jaw overgrown with coarse beard, and a temper that had famously cost him 3 fingers in a knife fight years ago. His broken nose leaned to one side as if nature itself had given up trying to straighten him. Mateo didn't follow orders out of loyalty, only out of fear of the cartel that had once saved him from a rival gang. Now, both men stared at Owen with the detached certainty that he would not survive. And indeed, the river seemed eager to prove them right. The raft suddenly lurched sideways. A strong current pulled it toward a cluster of rocks jutting from the water, their edges slick and sharp like teeth. Owen tried to shift his weight, but his limbs were bound too tightly. All he could do was brace for impact. The raft struck the rocks with a dull crack. Cold water surged over the edge, splashing across his face. Owen coughed behind the gag, choking on the taste of silt and blood. Panic gnawed at him with sharp teeth. He fought against it, digging deep into the part of himself that had survived darker moments than this. The part trained to endure torture, starvation, and isolation. But the river didn't care about training. It cared only about physics, weight, and the slow decay of wood. Each impact loosened a plank. The raft groaned as if protesting the burden of carrying a dying man. Owen closed his eyes, breathing through his nose, trying to steady the tremor of fear slithering up his spine. His mind, unbidden, returned to the mission in Afghanistan. The explosion, the dust storm, the wet, choking sound his friend Miller had made as he bled out in Owen's arms. It felt too similar, too quiet, too inevitable. The raft drifted free from the rocks but now rode lower in the water. Every ripple spilled over the edge, soaking Owen completely. The river was merciless. Hypothermia would come. His pulse weakened, his fingers numbed. He tasted defeat, metallic and bitter. He tried to twist his wrists free, ignoring the rope carving fresh wounds into his skin. The world blurred again. His breath became fog against the cold night. He wasn't sure how long he drifted. Minutes, hours, a lifetime. But at some point the river bent sharply, guiding him into a narrower channel where the moonlight barely reached. The water here felt different, faster, more dangerous. Owen forced his heavy head upward. Up ahead, a fallen cottonwood tree stretched across part of the channel. Branches dipped into the water, creating a deadly snare that could flip the raft effortlessly. His heart slammed against his ribs. The river pushed him closer. He tried to roll his weight to one side, pulling against the ropes with every shred of strength he had left. The raft tilted, groaned, and began to spin. His breath hitched. If the raft flipped, he wouldn't survive even a minute with his hands tied. The branches loomed closer, sharp, skeletal fingers grasping for him. Owen clenched his jaw, preparing for the worst. He whispered a desperate thought into the universe, a final instinct rather than a prayer. And as the wooden trap surged toward him, he felt the raft buckle under the pressure. Then the world pitched sideways into chaos. The world tilted violently as the shattered raft spun toward the fallen cottonwood. Owen Hale braced for the crushing blow he knew his body could not survive. But before the impact could claim him, the raft snagged against a submerged branch, jerking to a sudden halt. The shock rattled through him, loosening the last threads of consciousness he clung to. A cold haze crept over his vision. The river became a smear of silver and black. His breath came thin, shallow, fading. He felt his eyes closing, not out of choice but exhaustion. The darkness was gentle now, beckoning like a warm hand in winter. Then a sound tore through the silence. A harsh, ragged bark, raw and wild, nothing like the disciplined K9s he once trained beside. The second bark came sharper, echoing off the canyon walls. Owen's eyes fluttered open. Through the blur, he saw movement. Something dark and swift streaking along the riverbank. The shape sprang forward with a powerful leap, splashing into the violent current. As it battled the waves, moonlight caught on wet fur and revealed the unmistakable outline of a German shepherd. The dog was large but gaunt, ribs visible beneath its coarse black and tan coat. Tangled fur clung to its lean frame, and a long, pale scar carved a diagonal path across its shoulder, a wound that had healed unevenly, suggesting a past filled with violence or abandonment. Its ears stood rigid, one tipped slightly from an old injury, and its amber eyes burned with a desperation that didn't belong to an ordinary stray. It looked like a creature forged by hunger and survival, maybe 4 or 5 years old, still strong, but with the wary posture of an animal that had learned to trust no one. The shepherd paddled furiously, each stroke violent and determined, pushing its thin body through the churning water. It reached the side of the raft, jaws clamping down on the thick rope tied around the front plank. Owen could feel the tug as the dog pulled with everything it had. Its muscles trembled under the weight, water splashing against its muzzle as it tried to find leverage. Owen tried to lift his head, but his strength slipped away again. He wanted to tell the dog to stop, that it couldn't save him, but the gag muffled his voice. And still, the shepherd pulled. Its growls vibrated through the rope, low and guttural. Instinct, not reason, fueled it. Perhaps it sensed the fear radiating from Owen's failing body. Perhaps something in its scarred memory recognized a man on the edge of death. Or perhaps, though Owen could not know it yet, the dog had once belonged to someone who never returned, leaving it to roam these woods searching for voices that would not answer. With a final desperate heave, the dog twisted its body sideways beneath the water and yanked the rope free from the snag. The raft surged forward, carried by the angle of the pull. The shepherd didn't let go. It swam alongside, dragging the raft toward a patch of earth where reeds grew, thick along the bank. Its paws churned up mud as it climbed out of the water and used its entire weight to wrench the raft closer. When the front end scraped against land, the dog sprang forward, clamping its teeth onto the rope near Owen's wrists. It pulled with a snarl, shaking its head until the final knot slipped. Freed from the river's grip, the raft lurched up the muddy incline and Owen spilled off the edge, collapsing onto wet ground. He lay there, chest heaving, soaked to the bone. His pulse fluttered weakly beneath his skin. The shepherd circled him once, sniffing his face, its breath warm and uneven. If Owen had been fully conscious, he might have noticed the dog's expression. Not fear, not aggression, but a strange, fierce protectiveness. It stood over him for several moments, muscles quivering from exertion. Then, with a sudden shift in posture, it turned toward the forest. Its ears pricked. Something had changed. The dog bolted into the dark pines, disappearing so fast it seemed to dissolve into the night. Owen's heart sank. In his fading mind, the dog's departure felt like abandonment. Another presence leaving him behind to die. Just like Miller on that battlefield, just like every ghost that still haunted him. But the forest remained restless. Leaves rustled, underbrush cracked, and then, farther away but unmistakable, the shepherd's bark rang out again. Not frantic, not afraid, urgent, repeating, calling. Owen realized with a slow, dawning clarity. It wasn't leaving. It was signaling, seeking someone. As another wave of exhaustion swept over him, he tilted his head toward the trees. The barking grew louder, closer, echoing with purpose. The dog was bringing help, and for the first time since being thrown onto the raft, Owen felt a faint spark within his chest. Thin as a match flame, but alive. He wasn't alone anymore. The forest breathed with a restless hush as the wild shepherd's barks scattered through the pines, sharp enough to split the quiet dawn. At the edge of Rust Creek Ranger Station, a squat wooden building weathered by years of sandstorms, 2 rangers were locking up the filing shed when the noise reached them. The first to react was Ranger Eli Marlowe, a tall man in his early 40s with a lean, wiry frame and a face carved by long days under desert sun. His short, copper-brown beard framed a mouth that rarely smiled, and his deep-set hazel eyes carried the look of someone who had seen too many rescue missions end too late. Eli was known for being blunt, steady-handed, and fiercely protective of anyone under his watch, a personality shaped by losing his younger brother in a flash flood years ago, a tragedy that left Eli with a relentless instinct to respond at the slightest cry for help. Beside him stood his partner, Ranger Dana Whitlock, a woman of about 30 with a compact athletic build and dark hair tied in a tight braid. Her olive-toned skin was dotted with faint sun freckles, and her sharp brown eyes missed very little. Dana was calm where Eli was intense, analytical where he was impulsive. Her father had been a paramedic, and she had grown up believing every life mattered, even the ones the world didn't pay attention to. They exchanged a glance when the barking grew louder. "That doesn't sound like any ranch dog," Dana muttered. Before Eli could answer, the shepherd burst from the tree line, a streak of mud, ribs, and desperation. Up close, the dog was even more striking. Its fur clumped with river water, its chest heaving with exhaustion, amber eyes burning with fierce urgency. The long scar on its shoulder gleamed pale under the station lights. The dog skidded to a halt in front of them, barking once, then grabbing Eli's pant leg and tugging with surprising strength for an animal so thin. Eli stiffened. The tug wasn't aggressive. It was pleading. Dana crouched slowly, palms open. "Hey, boy, what is it?" The shepherd let go, only to dart a few steps toward the forest, then whip back to bark at them again. "Something's wrong," Eli said, his voice tightening. "Grab the med kit." They followed the dog into the trees, branches whipping past, their boots pounding the damp earth. The shepherd kept checking behind itself, making sure they followed, then sped up again. After several minutes, the forest thinned into marshy ground near the river, and in a hollow of reeds they found him. Owen Hale lay half in mud, half on the broken remains of the raft. His skin was pale, lips blue, clothes drenched and heavy. Rope burns marred his wrists raw and bleeding. Dana dropped to her knees instantly, checking his neck for a pulse. "Weak, but it's there," she breathed. Eli radioed for emergency assistance, his normally steady voice trembling. Together they hauled Owen onto a stretcher board from their kit. As they lifted him, the shepherd pressed against the stretcher's edge, letting out a low whine, its tail rigid with fear. When the ATV from the station arrived, the dog tried to climb onto the small trailer. Eli blocked it gently. "Easy, boy. We'll take care of him." But the shepherd refused to be left behind. It ran alongside the moving ATV the entire way back, paws slapping the dirt in frantic rhythm, every muscle shaking with stubborn loyalty. At the ranger station's infirmary room, an improvised clinic stocked for emergencies, the medics worked fast. Under bright, sterile lights, Owen's skin looked even paler, shadows carved deep beneath his eyes. His breath rasped shallowly, a consequence of cold shock and near drowning. The shepherd sat outside the double doors, soaked tail curled around itself. Whenever a medic opened the door to pass through, the dog pushed forward, nose searching, eyes locked onto the motionless figure inside. A new medic approached, Officer Paul Rayner, an older man with a stocky build, sandy hair graying at the temples, and a nose crooked from an old bar fight in his 20s. Paul had a reputation for being gruff, impatient, but deeply competent. He waved a hand at the dog. "Move along, Mutt. This isn't your place." The shepherd did not move. When Paul nudged it lightly with his boot, the dog let out a warning growl. Not threatening, but protective. Primal. Dana stepped in quickly. "Leave him. He's not going anywhere until the man wakes up." Hours passed. The shepherd remained unmoving, shivering but refusing water, refusing food, refusing comfort. Only watching the door. Waiting. Near dawn, Owen jolted awake with a sharp gasp, coughing violently. Dana rushed to support him while Eli steadied the IV line. Owen's eyes darted wildly until they locked onto the shadow by the door. The shepherd lifted its head, ears pricking. Owen swallowed hard, memories returning in disjointed flashes. The river, the darkness, the dog's frantic pull. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked from exhaustion. "The mission file. It was wrong." Dana frowned. "What do you mean wrong?" Owen forced himself upright despite the pain. "Map was altered. My route wasn't the one I approved." Eli's expression darkened. "Altered by who?" Owen clenched his jaw. "Pierce. Lieutenant Pierce. He wanted me out there. Alone." Dana's breath caught. "Are you saying someone in your own unit set you up?" Owen nodded once, grimly. "He wants me gone." The room fell silent, the weight of betrayal thick as the desert heat. At the door, the shepherd let out a soft, relieved whine, as if confirming to itself that the man it saved truly lived. And somewhere deep inside Owen's battered chest, a spark of determination flickered. Whoever Pierce thought he could silence, he had just failed. The desert night had settled in a hush so complete that even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Inside Rust Creek Ranger Station, the dim hallway lights hummed with a sleepy monotony, casting a faint glow over the whitewashed walls. Owen Hale lay half awake on his infirmary cot, still sore from the river ordeal, his ribs wrapped tightly beneath medical gauze. Every breath carried a low ache, but it was an ache he had learned to live with. Pain had been a companion long before this mission went wrong. The wild shepherd lay curled at the foot of his bed, its ragged fur rising and falling with steady breaths. Owen had learned the dog was younger than it looked, maybe 3 or 4 years old, but life in the desert had carved harsh lines into its lean frame. Its ribs were visible, its ears torn at the edges, and the long scar over its shoulder stood like a silent record of its battles. Yet, despite its feral past, the dog held a strange watchfulness, as if guarding him had become a self-assigned duty. A faint click echoed through the building. Then another. Owen frowned. Ranger Dana Whitlock had taken the night shift outside, and Eli Marlowe was logged in to monitor the security desk. Neither of them should be inside at this hour. The shepherd's head snapped up, ears rigid, its amber eyes sharpened, pupils thinning into narrow slits. Owen sat up. "What is it, boy?" The lights went out. Every bulb, every emergency lamp, dead in an instant. A suffocating darkness swallowed the hallways. Owen's pulse tightened. No, not now," he whispered. He swung his legs off the bed, fighting a surge of pain tearing through his abdomen. From somewhere near the main entrance came a sharp metallic crash, followed by the unmistakable burst of automatic gunfire. The sound rattled the windows like a desert storm breaking its chains. The shepherd lunged to its feet, growling deep and low. Owen grabbed his vest and sidearm, barely managing to fasten the straps. His fingers trembled, not with fear, but with recognition. This wasn't a random attack. This was orchestrated. Boots pounded across tile. Gunfire crackled. Men shouted in Spanish. Cartel. Owen stumbled into the corridor, one hand braced against the cold wall, ribs screaming with every step. Flickering moonlight streamed through the windows, just enough to reveal shapes moving in the dark, 3 silhouettes advancing swiftly with rifles raised. Before Owen could lift his gun, a blur launched forward. The shepherd. It hit the first man with explosive force, clamping its jaws around the guard's wrist. The rifle clattered to the floor. The second man swung a knife, but the shepherd twisted, snapping its teeth into his forearm, tearing skin. The third man raised his weapon. "Down!" Owen barked, and the dog dropped low just as Owen fired. The bullet struck the attacker's thigh, sending him sprawling. The shepherd barked once, sharp and urgent, a warning. Someone else was coming. Owen's heart froze when he saw who stepped out of the shadows. Lieutenant Pierce. Tall, mid-40s, muscular in a way that came from years of field combat rather than gym conditioning. His narrow face was marked by a severe jawline, a neatly trimmed beard peppered with gray, and cold blue eyes that once carried authority but now gleamed with treachery. His uniform was stripped of insignia, replaced by black tactical gear. His expression was a sneer sharpened by greed and cowardice. This was the man Owen once trusted with his life, the man who altered the maps, the man who wanted him dead. He lifted his pistol with a slow, deliberate precision. "You should have drowned, Hale." Owen aimed back, breath tight, vision swimming, but his hands were shaking, and Pierce saw it. "Goodbye," Pierce hissed. Time stretched thin. The desert wind outside seemed to stop. Pierce pulled the trigger, but the shepherd moved first. With a guttural snarl, the dog hurled itself between Owen and the gun. The shot cracked like lightning. The dog yelped, a raw, shattering sound, and collapsed, blood blooming across its flank. Something inside Owen broke. The hesitation in his limbs vanished, replaced by a blistering rage so clean and focused it felt like the war waking inside him. He launched at Pierce with the full weight of his training, tackling him into the wall. Pierce slashed wildly with his knife, but Owen caught his wrist, twisting hard. The blade clattered to the floor. "You betrayed your own," Owen growled, voice scraped raw. "And you tried to kill what saved me." Pierce spit blood. "You were a loose end." Owen slammed him to the ground. The impact echoed through the hall. He seized a length of discarded flex cuffs, binding Pierce's wrists behind him despite the pain tearing through his ribs. When the last cuff clicked shut, Pierce stopped struggling, defeated, panting, his face twisted in bitterness. Cartel footsteps retreated outside. Dana and Eli had rallied other rangers, returning fire, pushing the intruders back into the desert. The station was battered, cracked by gunfire and smoke, but standing. They had held, but Owen's victory tasted like ash. He dropped to his knees beside the shepherd. Blood trickled in thin dark lines onto the cold tile. The dog's breaths were shallow, ragged, each one a battle. Owen lifted its head gently into his lap. "Stay with me," he whispered, voice trembling for the first time in years. "You saved my life. I won't let you go. Not tonight." The shepherd blinked slowly, leaning into his hand. Its tail thumped weakly once, loyalty even now. And in that moment, beneath the broken lights and scattered shell casings, Owen swore a vow. Quiet, fierce, carved into the marrow of his bones. No matter what it cost, he would keep this dog alive. The shepherd had given him a second chance at life. He would give it a future. The hours after the firefight stretched into a haze of tension and blood-sharp air as medics rushed the wounded shepherd into the small infirmary room. Owen Hale followed as far as he was allowed, but when the surgical doors shut against his chest, he could do nothing except stand there gripping the doorframe, his knuckles turning white. Through the narrow window, he caught a glimpse of the veterinary surgeon on duty, Dr. Leon Garvey, a man in his early 50s with a broad back, graying curls tied into a short knot, and deep lines carved around his mouth from years of exhaustion rather than laughter. Dr. Garvey had a reputation for two things: an unmatched skill with injured animals and a gruff impatience toward anyone who got in his way. His thick eyebrows drew low as he worked, muttering under his breath with the focus of a man who had seen hundreds of creatures slip away and refused to surrender another. The dog was laid on the metal table, its fur shaved around the wound. When Garvey removed the bullet, his jaw tightened. "Lucky," he growled. "If this had been an inch deeper, he'd be gone." Owen's chest loosened, but only slightly. The night bled into dawn as the bullet wound was cleaned and stitched, fluids pumped into thin veins, and the shepherd stabilized. When Garvey finally emerged, wiping his hands on a towel, he spoke in his usual clipped tone. "He'll live. The bullet missed the organs. Passed through muscle only. Whoever he belongs to, they're lucky." "He belongs to no one," Owen said quietly. Garvey raised a brow, then shrugged. "Then maybe he belongs to you now." Inside the recovery room, the shepherd slept, its breaths shallow but steadier. In the muted glow of the lamp, Owen stepped closer and rested a hand on its paw. Its fur was warm beneath his fingers, warm with life he could have lost tonight. Something inside him softened, a fragile thread pulling tight between them. "You need a name," he murmured. He thought of the echo chambers in SEAL training, where every shout came back weaker, a reminder of the voices they'd lost. He thought of his fallen teammates, Bradley, Miller, Ortiz, men whose bravery lived on only in memory. "Echo," he whispered. The shepherd stirred faintly, its ear twitching at the sound. When Echo finally woke, his amber eyes drifted toward the door, searching until they found Owen standing there, even groggy, his gaze locked onto the man who had fought for him, and a faint thump of his tail tapped against the blanket. From that moment on, Echo's loyalty clung to Owen like a shadow. If Owen stood, Echo watched. If Owen walked, Echo limped after him. Rangers teased gently, Eli smirking, Dana nudging Owen with her elbow. "Look at that. He thinks he's a retired military dog now." Owen would only shake his head, though a rare smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Days passed, and Echo's strength returned, the wound healing cleanly under Garvey's sharp-eyed supervision. One morning, Owen led him to the edge of the station where the metal gate opened onto open woodland. The sunrise painted the sky in a fierce wash of red and gold, stretching long shadows over the dirt road. Owen unlatched the gate, the hinges creaking softly. "You're a free soul," he told him. "If you want to run, I won't hold you." Echo stepped forward. The forest breeze lifted his fur as he paused, staring into the vast expanse of wilderness. Then, without a glance back, he walked into the trees. Steady, silent, fading into the green like he'd never belonged anywhere else. Owen stayed rooted in place, watching the shadow disappear. He felt a strange emptiness spread through him, an ache he didn't expect. The station felt quieter without the dog's footsteps. One day passed, then two, then three. On the fourth morning, as Owen prepared for his next mission, a hunt for the cartel remnants still hiding along the border, he stepped outside with his gear strapped tight. The desert wind carried a chill, pushing dust along the path. He paused when he saw movement near the entrance. A black silhouette approached, limping slightly but walking with stubborn pride. Echo. His fur still rough, his eyes still scarred by old battles, but his stance unshaken. He stopped before Owen, head lifted, breath steady. In those amber eyes was a message clearer than any word. He wasn't here by accident. He wasn't returning for safety or food. He was choosing his path. Choosing Owen. Something in Owen's chest loosened and then steadied, stronger than before. He knelt and placed a hand on Echo's head. "If you're coming with me," he murmured, "then we walk into fire together." Echo leaned into his palm. Side by side, man and dog turned toward the horizon, toward the borderlands where danger swirled and unfinished battles waited. Two souls who had once been broken now stepped forward as something stronger, companions bound by fate, forged by survival, ready to face whatever darkness lay ahead. In the end, this story reminds us that miracles don't always come with light or thunder. Sometimes they arrive quietly. A wounded shepherd dragging itself through the dark to save a stranger, guided by something greater than instinct alone. Owen's survival wasn't luck, it was grace. It was God working through the most unlikely messenger, proving that hope can return even when life feels lost. And in our own days, through hardship, loneliness, or fear, help often appears in small, unexpected ways. A kind word, a second chance, a moment of strength we didn't know we had. If this story moved you, please share your thoughts in the comments and tell others where you're watching from. And remember to subscribe for more stories of courage, redemption, and God's quiet miracles. May the Lord bless you, protect you, and guide you, just as He did on that riverbank in the darkest hour.